Hi, I'm Brian Van, sportbiketracker.com, and today we're going to install a set of driven block-off plates on our 2017 STG R6 project bike. Okay, here's what we eliminated: the pair system on the 1718 R6, the plates, the solenoid, the tubing. This is a pretty big project. This isn't for everybody, okay? And if you follow this video, it'll probably help you get through it. If you don't feel comfortable, take it and have a licensed technician do it. Remember, this is for closed course operation only. This is not for just regular street riding. You're gonna get a check engine light, for sure. You can either leave the solenoid plugged in, remove everything else, leave the solenoid plugged in to keep the light off. I understand that will work. The best way to manage this and get the light turned off is to flash the ECU on the bike. That'll allow you to disable the light, which is nice. You could also ride around with the light on if you choose to do that. So just be aware of those things up front. Let's talk about the tools that I used to do the project. T-handles are a must. I've got a 4 and a 5 here. Side cutters, common pliers, needle nose. I use these cool angle pistol grip pliers to help get some of the clamps off. Could have got away without those. Small flathead screwdriver. To get off the block-off plates off the engine itself, 3/8 ratchet, 6-inch extension. We used a universal because the angle is tight. It's really not straight. You can't get straight on it. And then I have a 5mm Allen socket. For the airbox screws, yeah, I used a screw gun. You could also use a Phillips screwdriver. That is your choice. To manage the tank bolt at the very back, I got a 10mm socket, 10mm wrench. Blowgun, I used that to make sure I was blowing out all of the throttle bodies. And then to manage the throttle bodies themselves, I went with a spinner T-handle from Motion Pro and a 5mm bit to break loose all of the lower airbox mounting bolts. These are the tools it took to do the job. You know, this is one of those mods, I'll be honest with you, I don't even look forward to doing this one. It's a whole lot of work to put on these two tiny little plates. But if you're gonna put a full exhaust on your bike, you wanna get your bike tuned, okay? Obviously, closed course use for sure. These are important. You need to remove the air injection system in order to get a proper tune on the bike. Oftentimes, if you leave all this stuff in place, don't tune it, put a full system on it, you'll notice things like on decel, downshifting, you get a lot of popping and farting. That stuff's actually kind of cool, so maybe you want to leave that. But what it really comes down to is being able to get a good, accurate fuel map. These are essential to doing just that. Today, we're going to run through the process of removing the fuel tank, the airbox, and that's what it takes to get to these parts, and then installing the block-off plates on top of the head. Okay, first step is the seat. A lot of this is pretty mundane, pretty boring stuff. If you don't feel comfortable doing this on your own, it is a good idea to take it in and have a licensed technician do it for you. Okay, this is a pretty big process, and it's important that it turns out well. There are little side trim panels on the fuel tank. Need to pull those off too. These slide back, okay, so you pull out the fastener here and then slide back. There's one, of course, on each side. Like so. Make sure to keep track of the fasteners where they went so you get them all back in the same position. The block-off plates do include an instruction sheet. It does make reference to the FI light coming on. That's different from bike to bike. To be honest with you, I don't know if we're going to have an FI light on the R6 or not. We'll find out as we go through the process. Okay, now onto the fuel tank. It's also not a bad idea to try and do this when you've got a lighter fuel load, okay? I wouldn't go fill it up and then jump on this project. certainly doesn't make it any easier. The fuel tank is held on here, and then on each side of the tank, right here, you're going to see that button head fastener. It's 4mm hex head. Okay, you need to remove both of those, and then we have back here the main bolt that attaches it to the subframe. All that needs to come out. These side mounts, they're kind of tucked away in there. A little more difficult to fish out than the other bolts that are really readily accessible. Got the fuel vent line here is really putting some pressure on that. Have to distort that a little bit, and there's the fastener right there. One on each side. One of the most common questions we get with the blockoff plate installs is, do you leave that stock reed and gasket in place? The answer to that on basically every application is yes. Those will stay there, and that holds true on this model as well. These side mount fasteners for the fuel tank, these are super important on this R6. I've seen more than one rider put the bike back together without these fasteners, and it puts a lot of pressure on the side panels on the gas tank, and that stuff usually ends up breaking. So be really careful with this. Make sure you put those back in there. If you have extra fasteners when you're done, that's not a good thing on this project. Make sure you get your top hat, spacers, washers. Now we can come back here and get that main pivot for the fuel tank. Use a T-handle to get this off. I'm going to leave the fastener in the back here, the tank, and use that as a hinge. These two vent lines are kind of holding the tank down, so I need to separate those on each side. It's going to allow me to lift the tank up. Like so. And now I can lift the tank much higher. From here, we have our pressure line, and then we also have the connector for the fuel pump. Connector for the fuel pump is right here, the release. Very easy to find. You just push in on that. It allows you to pull it right out. Now we need to release the quick connect for the fuel pump. Okay, before I disconnect the fuel tank, what I like to do is just put a rag down here. We're going to lose a little bit of fuel, not a ton. I also like to take off this support so that we don't lose it in the process and forget to put it in there. What this does, this actually keeps that pressure line from being kinked when you reinstall the tank. You kink the line. Oftentimes the bike will run, but it'll run like because you don't have enough fuel, so it's just way too lean. You don't have enough volume or pressure. To release the line, you want to push in on both sides where you see the green here, and then manipulate it outward. Like so, just a little bit of fuel lost, not much. From here, set the tank back down, allow it to rest, pull the main bolt out, and we're going to put the tank off to the side somewhere where it's safe. This has got probably about a quarter tank of fuel in it right now, so that was really easy to do. Give you a look here. You can see the amount of fuel that we lost. Really not much. The rag was able to absorb that. You can have a look right here and see the releases for that fuel line. You simply need to push in. It's going to allow the tanks to pop outward. Then you can slide it off like so. Here are the vent lines. You can see they're captured right here. Make sure you get that all back into position when you reinstall it. Now it's time to remove the airbox in the bike. To remove the airbox, we need to actually take all of the screws out of the perimeter so we can lift up on it. We also have to take the fuel line off from the upper rail fuel injectors. To do that, pull back here, and then just like with the one from the fuel pump, go ahead and push in on the release, like so. And you can see I lost a little bit more fuel, but I've still got the rag in place. We're gonna let all that dribble out before we move too much farther and let it soak the fuel up. Okay, so to remove the upper cover of the airbox, what I want to start by doing is disconnecting this harness here. Just try and get everything you can out of the way so as you proceed through it, you don't have to pause. So let's get it unplugged first. The connector is right here. Like so. You'll also note that as we get to the lower portion of the airbox, we've got a stepper motor, right? We've got a vent tube that we'll also need to remove. Screwdriver time. I'm going to use a screw gun. It's your choice whether or not you want to do that. If you do, make sure you use caution. You don't want to jack up all the screw heads, okay? A screw gun does that a lot easier than a screwdriver, especially when you're tightening them back down. Once you have all the fasteners out, you'll see the cover comes off very easy. If you intend to change your air filter, okay, this is what you would need to do in order to access that. So if you're going to put in a K&N, a BMC, something of that nature now, this would be the same process, right, to get to that. Obviously this bike still has the OE filter in it right here. Okay, now lower airbox. Essentially what we have here is right over the throttle bodies, all the fasteners are located here and they bolt the lower airbox right to the throttle bodies. A Motion Pro T-handle here, a little spinner, this thing's pretty cool. These are all captured fasteners, okay? All my throttle plates are closed. I don't have any other projects going on right now, so I'm really not worried about debris falling down inside of the throttles. It's not a bad idea to grab 4 rags, crumble them up, and stuff them down into the throttle bodies right now. What that will do is if in fact you do happen to drop something, okay, it'll just help prevent it from getting down any further. It's just a precautionary measure. What I will do before I reassemble completely is I will hit this with a blowgun and make sure all the throttle bodies are totally empty. There's really no risk of dropping these fasteners in there because, like I said, they are all captured. And now we have to remove an electrical connector here, like so. We need to disconnect that vent hose. Clamp's a little bigger, we're not going to do that one by hand. check the rest of it and see if the rest will come off. So right there as I'm pulling up on it, it feels like one of the fasteners is not out all the way. It's actually this one right here. There we go, like that. Now, over on this side of the airbox, we have another vent hose. Just gonna release that by hand. Okay, and here is your lower airbox assembly. Okay, one little tip. So even if someone does this, turns the throttle, okay, those aren't moving. They need the motor right here to drive them. Okay, remember this is by wire. So you're safe. If you turn the throttle, something's laying on top of it, it's not gonna fall in there. Now we need to remove this air deflector that helps distribute the airbox, the air into the airbox, okay? This clip I just pulled out of the center, that's actually a mount that holds the air injection solenoid itself. There are two clips that are underneath here that I have released. Continue to slide this out of the way. Okay, there's your release clips right there. You can access those very easily from underneath. Okay, before we pull out the solenoid, the tubing, and the covers off the top of the engine, I did a little more research. With this bike, okay, you have to either A, leave the solenoid plugged in. You'll take all the tubes out, but you're gonna leave the solenoid plugged in so the ECU thinks it's there. Or flash tune this thing in order to turn the FI light off. So by removing this, you are getting an FI light. Okay, so if you do this and you don't leave it plugged in and you don't have it flashed, you're gonna ride around with the light on, which is certainly not optimal. Ryan is going to have, we have a local guy, Harry, that does this stuff, right? He's got his own dyno, the whole gig. The bike's gonna go there when we're done. So in this install, we're just gonna remove everything and Ryan's gonna roll out of here with the engine light. So that is our expectation. There are select models, this is not one of them, where we have a part from Heel Tech that basically you plug in place of, it's just a little, look at like a little resistor, a little plug-in device that wires around that. It's very small, very lightweight to keep the FI light off on bikes where it would normally turn on. That is not available on this R6. So now we're gonna focus on removing all this from the bike. They have these covers, right? These rubber protectors on all the clamps, okay? That's what I'm removing right now. There is not one out here on the outside, but there was everywhere else, okay? Okay, I've got the tubes off the stock plates. This is going to give me a little bit better access to the release for the electrical connector for it. Okay, there we have it. There is our solenoid with all the associated tubing. Now we're down to the plates themselves. We've got a cover that we need to roll back, okay? It's an insulator. I'm going to roll this back. That'll give me access to the fasteners for the plates. In most applications, let me tell you, those are in there really tight. Okay, so I want you to expect them to come out with a fair measure of resistance. Okay, I'm going to use a 3/8 ratchet. That's a 5mm hex socket extension with a universal. If your engine compartment is excessively dirty here, okay, before you remove everything all the way, it's not a bad idea if you have an air compressor to take a blowgun and just clean the area. And you know what, before I go any further, I'm going to do that. Even some of this stuff, you can kind of really cut this down. You will reuse these fasteners. You can see from the factory they do have some thread locker on them. Okay, blue color is what we're going to use on the reinstall. We're going to do one plate at a time here. Give you a good look at what we reuse, what we discard. Okay, once you have the fasteners out, here is that stock plate. Okay, you can see down in there, we're going to leave everything else in place. No need to remove anything. It's all going to stay right there. I do want to make sure that that gasket surface is totally clean and free of debris. The reed, everything stays in place. Okay, when you look at the plate, you're going to see there's a relief cut out in it. Okay, when you look down here, this is going to be really tough to see from this angle, but there are two tabs that are standing up, okay, that will slide inside of here. So the way this cover is going to be installed is the relief will be towards the rear of the bike. All right, we've got our blue thread locker on the fasteners. We are reusing the same stock fasteners that we took out. And we'll go ahead and run these down evenly and then apply final torque. If you're into using the torque wrench, it's up to you. I'm going to shoot for just nice even torque here. Really not a lot of pressure here. Not a lot of high, this isn't a high stress area by any stretch of the imagination. The reason the thread locker is used is you don't want them to come loose, right? That would be uncomfortable for sure. A real pain in the shorts to fix, so that's why the thread locker's there. Now we're going to do the other side. It's really just a mirror image. Everything we showed you on the left side will be done over here on the right. Okay, now before we install this, and look at that right there, now you're going to be able to see those tabs. Okay, that's what rides inside the relief. So install the plate accordingly. What happens if you install these wrong? And I've seen it done before. It makes the strangest noise. Sounds kind of like the motor's coming apart in the upper half. Go figure that. I have seen that before, more than once. So take your time here. Make sure that when you drop the plate on by hand that it sits flush. If it does not sit flush, you have a problem. Take a look at what you're doing. And by double checking your work right here, you can save yourself a whole lot of grief, not to mention the person that finds you install these things wrong, they're gonna bust your balls and that's not gonna be fun. Okay, both sides are torqued, final torque. Once again, double, triple check your work right here. Now is the time to find it. You don't want to find it later after you have everything bolted back together. Hey man, I screwed up. Gotta take it all back apart. No, you want to find that right now, so take your time here. Something really important to note, okay, we've eliminated the solenoid, the piping that goes to it, and remember, that was being used to secure this harness. Now, look what's right here. It's the fan, okay? This stuff easily could float right into that, probably cut right through it, and that is not going to be a win for you, okay? You do not want that. So, here as well, take your time. Let's secure all these wires right now so that we are definitely not going to have issues moving forward. Let's roll that insulator back into position. I'm going to grab some cable ties and we're going to make sure we've got these harnesses all secured properly so we will avoid any future issues resulting from this installation. Like so, and you can see that's really tidy. We're good to go. There is nothing to be concerned for here. Okay, we're not going to create any future issues with this install. We'll cut those tails off of those and we'll be ready to begin reassembling. Like so, make sure that is secured in there. You've got a tang in the front and then 2 tabs back here. Okay, before you install the lower half of the airbox, the block-off plate kit comes with this plug. Remember, we've eliminated some of the piping. You need to slide this over. The clamp for the stock hose, it's not going to fit because the thickness of this plug is much less than the thickness of that OEM hose. Okay, so the clamp itself is just going to, the inner diameter is way too big. So what I'll typically do here is just put a little piece of safety wire on it and use that to hold this down. Odds are you could probably just slide it over and it'd be good to go. But we'll take and secure it so that we definitely do not have any issues down the road. Safety wire works great for this. Just enough so that it can't slide over. Trim it. And go ahead and just fold that out of the way. And now we're ready to reassemble the airbox. I used a blowgun to blow everything out, just real lightly. And of course we will do that again before I put the cover back on the airbox. With these fasteners now, literally I'm just going to give them each just a turn or two, just enough to get them started. What you don't want to do is just run one down all the way, torque it, and then do the next one. That's the wrong way to do it. You want to get each one of them started before you put any torque into them. And once I've done that, I'll go ahead and just get them seated real lightly. One thing I would definitely recommend with something like this is you don't want to leave this half done. Don't leave this airbox open and walk away from it for a day or 2 days. That's typically not a good practice. So like even tonight, we're actually closing in a few minutes, but I'm not going to leave the top of the airbox off overnight. That's just not a solid practice. So I'm going to take the extra couple minutes. Steve's looking at me right now like, dude, really? I got to drive back downriver. Damn it. But that's just the best way to do it. And this, of course, is not my motorcycle. Make sure the torque is good and even, and that you've got each one We'll also take a good look at the velocity stacks and make sure that nothing's become dislodged. These can pop out. See that? Do not put this pike back together with that velocity stack hanging out. Clips right back in. Make sure that moves freely. Okay? Blow gun time. Grab the air filter and the top cover for the airbox. Okay, we got to get this thing seated first. You need to tip it back like so, and then push down and engage up front here. Okay. From there, we're ready to install the upper portion of the airbox. And Steve's like, sweet, we get to actually go home now. Make sure everything lines up just right. It should sit right down there perfectly. And then reinstall all of the upper airbox fasteners. Hand screwdriver is best practice. You choose to use a screw gun. Just be careful with it. And everything you're dealing with here is plastic. There are metal inserts in there, but still, you want to make sure you keep the torque at reasonable levels. And you also don't want to cross thread any of the fasteners. Okay, airbox is all on, screws are all tight, we're good to go. Now it's just time to finish the reassembly of the bike. At the end of the day, all we're doing here is we're just going backwards from what we already showed you. Just kind of rewind. It's most important to make sure you take your time. You get everything put back together nicely. You don't create drama for yourself. Push the lock in, engage that. Reconnect all of the harnesses that we had disconnected. I want to get this stuff all run very, very cleanly. Okay, we've got a cable tie that we have to replace back in here. It'll be clipped right here. Don't need that rag anymore. Okay, take a last look here, and then we'll get ready for the fuel tank. We can bring that back over and get that into position. Just kind of drop that in like so. If you want just to hold it in place while you're working. So you have that point of stability. You can go ahead and slide that mount bolt through. Like so. That allows you to tip it up quite a bit. And then from here, we have our pressure line. Definitely double check these, okay? You want to make sure that these are engaged without any issue whatsoever. Fuel pump connection. Good positive click there. Now, here's the most important step. Remember, we remove this. Okay, this brace prevents that fuel line from being kinked. You need to reinstall that. And then you want to keep an eye on the tank so that when you dip it back into position, you do not see that fuel line being kinked, okay? That actually looks really good from where I'm at here. Now we can focus on the vent hoses. Okay, now we're ready to go grab our fasteners. And get those installed. Okay, now let's go ahead and get this fastener in place. Not going to tighten it up, just get it started, okay? And then we'll get all the rest started before we torque anything down completely. Remember, we have one on each side, one at the rear, and then we have one at the very front. I can't stress enough how important it is to make sure you get these fasteners on the sides installed. I've seen bikes ridden quite a bit without those, and what happens is over time, the lack of support, you end up damaging the plastic shrouds on the tank, and that's not something that you want to do. Trust me when I tell you that. Okay. We'll go ahead and torque all the fasteners down now. The last one we'll tighten is going to be the one in the back, that pivot bolt. From here, it's not a bad idea. Once you get the bike assembled enough, you can start it. Go ahead and run the bike, okay, before we put the rest of the body pieces on it. You want to make sure everything is good. It may not start right away because the fuel rail is essentially empty, okay? Check engine light, we knew that going into this. That'll be addressed after Ryan takes the bike back. He's going to have a flash done to it where they will disable the pair system with the flash, which will turn that light on. Before you ride it, warm everything up, cycle it, make sure it's good. Don't just take it out and ride it immediately and then discover you have a problem when you're out riding at the track or on the street. Now, we're just gonna put the rest of the trim back on the bike. Okay, we've got a couple of tangs we have to line up. This slides in here, this tang right here, this one right here, and then of course we have the fastener at the back. So pretty simple stuff. Just make sure you get everything engaged and then slide forward like so. It really kind of locks itself in there once you've gotten it done. Take a quick look at it before you put the fasteners in. And we'll repeat the process, of course, on the other side. Maybe a better visual here. This tang here, this tang here, this catches this, and then of course the bolt back here. Get everything into position and slide it forward like so. There is a little resistance as you do that, and then put your fastener right there. Okay, the rider's seat, want to make sure this tongue goes under here. It's going to hold it down in the front. Like to kind of slide it into position, a little bit of downward force. And then you feel it dip in, you pull up, it won't come up in the front. Really important you do that. And here in the back, you lift up on the ears of the seat. Super simple stuff. 5mm T-handle. Like so. Okay, there you have it. There's the full install. You can see this is a project. This probably is not for everybody, okay? If the stuff you watched here, if you're not comfortable with that, then take the bike in. Have a licensed technician do it. You could certainly create some issues if you don't get this done right. It's really important to understand too, this is for closed course operation only. We've eliminated some of the emissions stuff. There are laws that govern that, so if you don't want to get yourself jammed up there, you think that could be a problem, remember the responsibility and the choice is all yours, closed course only. I'm Brian Van, this is the driven block-off plate install on the 2017 STG R6 project bike.